It's 5:30 a.m. First Officer H.A. has just made contact with Mangalore Control. He has been handling the plane for the last few hours. In the left seat, Captain Z.G. has been sleeping. This crew previously flew their 737 from Mangalore to Dubai earlier that evening. The crew has been on duty for at least 9 hours. Now, as the late evening turns into early morning, they are on their way back to Mangalore, operating as Air India Express Flight 812. The first officer listens to the latest weather information from Mangalore before requesting a descent to begin the approach. The controller informs him that due to a radar outage, he will have to wait. This restriction increases the crew's workload because it means their descent path will be steeper. The controller also tells him to expect the ILS DME for runway 24. It is at some point during this exchange that the captain wakes up. No approach briefing is ever performed by the crew. Mangalore Airport is known as a tabletop airport because it is located on top of a hill. Given this, only the captain may fly the approach. At 5:47 a.m., only 77 miles from the airport, Flight 812 is cleared to begin its descent. The plane initially tracks towards the airport's VOR, then turns to intercept the DME arc. Taking into account the extra distance from the arc, the plane has about 100 miles of horizontal distance to decelerate and descend from 37,000 feet. This is less distance than the crew would normally use, but it is still more than enough. The crew plans their descent poorly and arrives with far too much altitude. They join the DME arc 10 miles north of the airport, over 10,000 feet above the airport. Not only are they coming higher than expected, they have left little room for the plane to decelerate. They finish flying the arc and turn final 10 miles from the airport, still above 7,000 feet. Had they briefed the approach beforehand, they would have known that at this point they should only be at 2,900 feet. At 6 a.m., having turned final, both pilots note that their ILS has captured the localizer and glide slope. But the glide slope they have actually captured is likely a false glide slope. Due to the nature of instrument landing systems, false glide slopes lie above the real 3-degree slope. Given the plane's altitude, it is likely that it is tracking the 9-degree slope. This glide slope will still bring them to the runway, but at a much steeper angle. At this angle, the plane will struggle to descend without also gaining speed, ultimately leading to an unstabilized approach. Unaware of this, the crew continues configuring for the landing. The first indication that something is wrong comes at 6:03. After completing the before landing checklist, the first officer looks out the window and says, "It's too high." The captain acknowledges this, but continues down anyway. He disconnects the autopilot and forces the plane down himself. The first officer asks the captain to go around, and then tells him to go around, but he is ignored both times. The plane's enhanced ground proximity warning system also blares warnings throughout the cockpit. It repeats "sink rate" several times, followed by "pull up." Due to the excess energy left over from the approach, the plane crosses the runway threshold 150 feet too high and 16 knots too fast. It floats for over 5,000 feet before touching down. The little runway remaining would still be enough to stop under ideal circumstances, but the brakes have only been set to the second setting. The captain retracts the reversers and applies full power in a desperate attempt to go around, but it is far too late. The aircraft continues off the end of the runway and past the runway end safety area. It strikes an ILS antenna with its right wing before leaving the airport boundary. It then falls off the hill at the airport perimeter, breaking apart and bursting into flames. Of the 166 passengers and crew, only 8 would survive the impact and the fire that followed. The investigation named one cause and three contributing factors. The main cause was the captain's decision to continue the unstable approach, despite warnings from both his first officer and the plane itself. One of the contributing factors was the possibility of fatigue in the captain. Fatigue is a very broad term, describing a state of reduced mental or physical performance. While in this state, a pilot is more likely to make mistakes and operate their aircraft in an unsafe manner. Fatigue can be caused by a number of factors. The two listed in the report are the window of circadian low and sleep inertia. The window of circadian low is a period of time tied to the body's own circadian rhythm. It can cause the effects of fatigue even in a well-rested person if they try to stay awake during certain periods of the day. The most pronounced period is between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m., right when the flight was taking place. Furthermore, the captain had just come back from a leave of absence, which he had spent in Serbia. He may have gotten used to Serbia's time zone, as well as a more regular sleep schedule. These factors may have worsened the effects of the window of circadian low. The second factor to consider is that the captain was likely suffering from sleep inertia. Sleep inertia happens when a person in a deep stage of sleep is awoken. Analysis of the breathing and snoring heard on the cockpit voice recorder seemed to indicate that the captain was in fact in a deep stage of sleep, just before waking up and performing the approach. The effects of sleep inertia include impaired judgment and awareness, in line with the captain's behavior during the approach. Sleep inertia has been shown to last between just a few minutes to several hours. According to the report, it is likely that the captain's sleep inertia persisted until the end of the flight. The tragedy of Air India Express Flight 812 was entirely preventable. It highlighted some flaws in the way fatigue and the risks brought about by fatigue are managed. Several recommendations, including those in the official report, may have saved the plane and its occupants. Regarding training, more emphasis should be put on how to identify false glide slopes. Training should also be provided on how to make good use of the vertical situation display during the approach, in order to increase situational awareness and plan descents more accurately. Finally, additional training is required in the areas of crew resource management, as well as the effects of fatigue on flight crews. Regarding operations, it should be made clear that any crew member may initiate a go-around at any time, and that these can be carried out without any blame. The first officer had ample opportunity to take control and execute a missed approach, but chose not to. Whatever his reason for doing so, it's clear that the pilot monitoring should be comfortable taking control from the pilot flying if necessary. Another recommendation is to make controlled rest periods in the cockpit not only more available to crew members, but also more strictly regulated. Well-designed controlled rest procedures reduce the risk of sleep inertia and make the crew more alert during the critical phases of flight. Thanks to the recommendations made to the airline, the airport operators, and India's Civil Aviation Authority, Air India Express has not had another accident since 2010. They continue to operate to this day as the low-cost subsidiary of Air India, which is India's flag carrier. The lessons learned from Air India Express Flight 812 have made them and other airlines around the world much safer.